Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the 100 Proof News Hound, and we're here with another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. Today, we're going to examine the life of America's premier confidence man, Charles Gondorf. He was the king of the cons. He could take your money and you would thank him for the experience. He was charming, urbane, and dangerous as a cobra. His life was made the subject of the movie The Sting. In fact, Paul Newman's character in the movie was Henry Gondorf. Now, remember to like and subscribe. Subscriptions especially are important for the development of the channel, so hit that button right now. Charles Gondorf and his family of grifters, they ran the big cons. These are big horse racing, mining, boxing scams involving multiple people. Well, just like the movie The Sting. The marks, though, in all of his scams had to share three qualities. They had to have a lot of money, otherwise it's not worth taking it from them. They've got to be greedy, and they have to be a little dishonest themselves. There has to be some larceny in the victim, otherwise he wouldn't fall for the scam. And as W.C. Fields once said, you can't cheat an honest man. And in these tales of cons, nobody's honest, but Charles Gondorf was the best. So let's dive into the life of Charles Gondorf and see what we find. The first time we see Charles is in 1900. It's in a paper called The Inter-Ocean of Chicago, Illinois, February 16th edition. And I'm going to spend some time on this article because it's quite one of the more unbelievable things that I've seen. If you think that journalism is tough today and that the battles between Fox and MSNBC are something, you've got no idea what used to go on here. Here we go. The heading is License at a Ball. Alderman John G. Coughlin, alias Bathhouse, opened his campaign for re-election last night at a masked ball given by the 1st Ward Democratic Club at the 1st Regiment Armory. He goes on to describe who was there. The scum of the Levy District was in attendance, and it is estimated that the Democrat statesman cleared $10,000. This money will be devoted to colonizing tramps, thieves, and thugs in the 1st Ward. Who was at the party? Confidence men, pickpockets, thieves, panel house healers, and many ex-convicts and desperate characters who operate in Chicago under license from the Harrison administration attended the masked ball. Dive women were there in numbers. Dive women are hookers. Were there in numbers. And the scene outranked any that have ever been created at a public building in the history of Chicago. The bar, which was run by Alderman Hinky Dink, was one of the big features of the entertainment. Several hundred waiters and 50 bartenders were kept busy serving wine, beer, and cigars. Quite the shindig. Now, he gets into some detail now about the types of people that were also there as guests. 15,000 tickets to the ball were forced on the licensed dive keepers and crooks, and about one-half of those were used. Some weeks ago, the confidence men, thieves, all-night saloon keepers, dive keepers, and inmates were notified by Coughlin and Kent's agents that they must take a certain number of tickets or meet with police interference. And who was there? Andrew Craig, alias Striped Andy, alias Window Washer, ex-convict and dive keeper. But also there was Joseph Bishop, alias Flatfoot, confidence man. And then reference to Frank Brown, alias Farmer Brown, confidence man and leader of the woolen mills. And then they make particular attention of Charles Gondorf, who's a young man at this time, in his mid-20s. Gondorf was there. Charles Gondorf, alias Fred Gould, levy dive keeper and leader of the Coughlin-Kennet confidence men. He looks after the alderman's State Street museums where confidence games are operated. So he seems to be at that point in time above just a petty operative. He's actually got a little fiefdom there staked out on State Street. But apparently all was not perfect and swell for the criminals of Chicago. Joliet, Illinois, Monday, November 27th, 1905. Chicago criminals are active in many cities. Swindlers from the metropolis leave their known haunts to seek their prey in smaller communities throughout the state. All the old games are being worked. So I guess the newspapers are putting out the word that the con men are coming. What's really fun is that the con men actually have a book, an actual, like an almanac. The circulation of the con men's directory, otherwise known as the con men's blue book, has been partially prohibited. All classes of confidence men found this volume, which contains the names, addresses, and affiliation of most of the influential and rich men of the country towns within a radius of 60 miles of Chicago, exceedingly useful. Gives them lots of information that they can work their cons with. By the knowledge which they obtained from this very handy work of reference, they were able to swindle their victims of their riches by claiming to be a friend or relative of the ruralist. The more you know about the mark, the more you know about the victim, the more you can make it look like you're actually acquainted with acquaintances of his, makes running the con much easier. In many other ways, through the exhaustive knowledge contained in the books, the confidence men were aided. It is noted that there is a move from the city by confidence men, and that others, including Charles Gondorf, have decided that the climate of Chicago is very insalubrious. So they're taking the show on the road. The first big con we run into is February 24th, 1907. The headline is Wiretappers Syndicate with Political Affiliations. The expose of the losses of William F. Walker of New Britain, who dropped $350,000 of other people's money to a new gang of swindlers. So something big has happened. He's lost $350,000, and that's only going to be the tip of the iceberg. And what's sad about this, or funny about this, is the fact that that money's not William F. Walker's. He's an officer of the New Britain Savings and Loan, and he's stolen the money from the bank and then lost it to grifters. How William F. Walker, absconding treasurer of the New Britain Savings Bank, lost $350,000 of other people's money to wireless wiretappers is full of amazing features. And the article goes in to describe some of those amazing features. The men who engaged in the coup against Walker were said to be Big Whitney, Charles Gondorf, Fred Gondorf, and Black Mike Olenberg. It is said on good authority that Walker was victimized in a hotel on 43rd Street near Broadway. At first, he was permitted to win $3,000, which was paid to him. Thinking the scheme would work as surely on every other succeeding occasion, he next entrusted $110,000 to the sharpers and proceeded to lose the balance of $240,000. Now that money there, that first $240,000 wasn't lost to Gondorf. It was lost to other folks who are running something called a bucket shop, a pool room. These are all just euphemisms for gambling establishments. If you have 8 pool tables out front, it's really, in New York City at that time, it's really just a front for the gambling operation that you're running in the back. And what a lot of these frauds involve is setting up phony gambling operations, well, with the consequences you'll see here. So Mr. Walker has lost $240,000. That's the equivalent of $7 million today. He's lost that. That's money he's absconded with from the bank. And now he's in a jam. He has to try to get that money back, or he's going to jail for quite a long time. That's when he runs into Gondorf. Walker at first was loath to listen to the scheme, which showed him a way towards salvation. Though deep in losses, he still retained some moral scruples against what he regarded as plain robbery. With Walker, the matter was much more difficult. The schemers, knowing that he was desperate to make his bucket shop losses good, never relaxed their endeavor to ensnare him. He came to the city as he'd been told and was introduced to a man in the hallway of the Western Union Telegraph Building who posed as the manager and agreed to give him advanced information on the races and enabled him to get his bets down before the winner was announced. That's the introduction to the wire fraud, to the wiretapping scam. What it really involves is the following. Back then, you have to realize that there were no telephones allowed inside of a racetrack. You couldn't do it. There was too much possibility of fraud. There were no telephones allowed. Of course, obviously, nobody had cell phones. The telegraph operator at the racetrack, once the race has been run, types out who the winners were and the results of the race. Those are sent to the downtown Western Union Station. The clerk at the Western Union Station then relays those results around the country to every bookie in town across the country and to all the newspapers so that everyone has the results simultaneously. What this fraud purports to do is inject a dishonest man down at the Western Union office. What he will do, according to the scam, is when the results come in, he will wait 5 minutes before posting them. What he does then is he'll use a phone, he'll call you, and he'll tell you that Seabiscuit came in second in the Elias Stakes, or he'll say that Poke Your Nose won the third race at Belmont. He'll give you those results before he passes those results on to the bookies. That allows you time to get into the bookie establishment, put your bet down, and then wait the 2 minutes that are remaining for the race to be run and the results to be announced. So you know the winner before the bookie does. This whole scheme is predicated on you trying to rip off the bookie. But it doesn't work that way because there is no intermediary. What they generally do is they know who's won the races. The whole thing is being delayed, so they know who the winners are before anything even is run. They tell you to bet Poke Your Nose in the 7th. He comes in, you win $3,000. Then generally what happens in the 8th race, they give you a horse. You put $10,000 on that horse, but the horse comes in second. They've given you the name of the second, the horse that finishes second in places. They say there's been a mistake, but you can get the money back. We know the system's good. You can get your money back on the next race. You put $50,000 on Seabiscuit at Hialeah, and Seabiscuit loses, and you lose all your money because the entire thing was a fraud. That's the nature of the straightforward wiretapping fraud. And Gondorf was apparently the king of that. So we get back here. Walker proceeds to bet on a series of races, loses $350,000 more, so that he's actually into this for $600,000. The police, however, get some leads. After weeks of investigation, it is probable that within a few days, the mystery of what William F. Walker did with a good part of the $545,000 of which the New Britain Savings Bank was looted will be cleared up. Received word that Charles Gondorf was involved in the scam. However, Gondorf denies all knowledge of what he is charged. Walker, it is now declared, first took up with a lot of fake mining schemes, and the wiretapping swindle was worked when he was in imminent danger of exposure, and as a last resort to get back what he had sunk into the various other ventures. So he was down $240,000 and then needed the money to square up and lost an additional $350,000 of other people's money. That is the better part of $20 million today. And the bank, of course, was kind of interested in recovering that money, and they hired Pinkertons to basically chase Mr. Walker and the wiretapping fraud folks all across the country. When arrested last night, and they did arrest Gondorf, when arrested last night, the prisoner gave his name as Charles Gondorf. In the short affidavit, Detective Valley accused the prisoner under the name of Charles Earl. According to detectives, Earl is the defendant's middle name. He was held under the name of Charles Earl. He goes by a bunch of different names. You'll see through here. There's 4 or 5 names that we know of, but he could have used, of course, any number of names in the furtherance of his interesting activities. Bail was fixed at $20,000, and Gondorf immediately offered Bob Nelson, a saloon keeper, as bondsman. So they had to post bail. There's professional bond companies. You generally post 10% in cash, which is what this fellow would have done, and then the rest would be placed by the bond company. If you've ever seen Midnight Run, you'll know how that all works. And if you haven't seen Midnight Run, go watch Midnight Run, because it's a heck of a movie. Headline: The Walker Clue, most promising. Bank officials say it's the best yet. See, well, they're looking for Walker. Walker's gone. One of the things that I read was that after the fraud was perpetrated, Gondorf and associates admitted as much that this was a fraud and said, you've been conned, but we've got your money, and what can you do about it? You're in a lot of trouble, and Walker, realizing he's in a lot of trouble, accepted assistance from Gondorf and his crew to get him on a boat and go to Cuba. He had what option did Walker have? He couldn't go to the police. He's losing stolen money. His best bet is to get out of the country, and Gondorf knows a lot more about that than does Walker. So that's one of the ways they say he got out of the country. What we do know is that he ended up in Mexico. Walker, the mark, but also the thief, ends up in Mexico. A posse has been sent out to arrest him. The American consul in Ensenada telegraphed to the bank that it is reported to him that Walker left the place when he was expected to be found on the night of the 25th of November on foot and carrying a large valise, being then 60 miles from the cases in the hands of the Pinkertons, and all avenues of escape from the country are being watched. So he's on the run in Mexico, and eventually he is actually caught, and he's brought back. Friday, January 17, 1908, William F. Walker, the embezzler of $600,000 from New Britain Savings Bank, under arrest at Ensenada, Lower California, now asserts that he was hypnotized in New York and recalls nothing of his crime or the criminals who helped fleece him. He does not remember who hypnotized him, and he denies that he ever heard the name of Big Whitney or Charles Gondorf. Well, without a witness, and he is the only witness to this, you walk. So, stealing stolen money apparently is, if not allowed, it certainly is condoned. Now, Gondorf was involved in many other types of frauds. One of the more fun ones here is evidenced by the headline of the Elmira Star-Gazette, November 11, 1908. Loses $15,000 on fake fight. Duffy Morris is held for shrewd confidence game which cost Scranton man a huge sum. If I can sort of summarize this. Somebody runs into a gentleman at the Waldorf Astoria. It's always the Waldorf Astoria. And he says, I've got a private rail car and we're going up to Boston in a few days, and we're going to go up there to watch a fight. It's being held at a millionaire's mansion. It's between the best bare knuckle fighter in Boston against a fighter from out west. And he goes, I got the scoop because the fix is in. So the fix is supposed to be in. They get on the private rail car, which they did in fact have, took it up to Boston, took this gentleman's $15,000, and that night the fight was held in the library of a Back Bay house, and the Boston boy curled up on the floor in the third round. So after the third round, the fellow that they bet on curled up in a ball, and they lost. Late subsequent says everyone disappeared, so he lost $15,000 and complained to the police. Another of his frauds that hit the newspapers is the Sapulpa Evening Democrat from Sapulpa, Oklahoma, October 10th, 1912. Detectives uncover loss by Major Pendleton and swindle by wiretapper. New York, fleeced out of $55,000 by a clever wiretapper who worked the first part of the game in the gilded corridors of the Waldorf Astoria. Major Edward Pendleton of New York, Palm Beach, and Tampa began giving evidence today before the grand jury as he recited a costly experience which he concealed until the Burns Detective Agency discovered he had been robbed and started an investigation. That's common. Nobody wants their name out and about on this thing. It ruins your reputation. Also, in most of these scams, you're trying to rip somebody else off. You're trying to do some illegal activity that turns out backfires on you, and your recourse is certainly not to the police. Major Pendleton and said one evening last winter he was strolling through the Waldorf when he fell into conversation with an affable stranger who confided to him that he owned a string of fast ponies and they had just been putting over some good things and was going to put across some even better ones. This stranger, Major Pendleton alleges, and the police believe was Charles Gondorf, known as the King of the Wiretappers. The Major went with the stranger to a West Side pool room to take advantage of what he considered a good sporting proposition, basically a fraud. He was in on it, but it turned out that he was the mark. He won $5,000 the first day, but the next day lost $30,000, and the following day dropped $25,000, and then he realized he'd been swindled. But he kept quiet, because that's what gentlemen do. But not everyone's a gentleman. November 8th, 1912, confidence men collect $25,000. North Carolina dentist and lawyer victims of wiretapping game. There's a good combination, a dentist and a lawyer. There's a couple of guys that would probably think they're the world's greatest businessmen, but in actuality aren't half as smart as they think they are, and probably are among the best marks that a confidence man could find. With the arrest of Charles Gondorf and Fred Gondorf, professional men about town, that's a great euphemism, eh? Sportsmen and men about town. This really has a guys and dolls feel to it, doesn't it? This morning, the police went actively to work on another problem of wiretapping and missing cash. This time, J.H. Powell, a dentist, and Kirby Cleveland Sidbury, a lawyer of Wilmington, North Carolina, are the victims, and they estimate their combined losses at $35,000. This time, it was Mr. McDonald, a wire chief at the Western Union Telegraph Company, who was supposed to hold up the racetrack results until the victims of the plot could be steered safely into a pool room and place their money. As usual, he was to release the results coming in over the wire fresh from the racetrack after the unsuspecting pool room men had accepted the bet. So they're trying to commit a fraud. They're absolutely, these upstanding dentist and lawyer are absolutely trying to commit a fraud, absolutely trying to steal the bookie's money, and absolutely are idiots and get caught and lose $25,000. What's funny is the dentist was content to lose $3,000. That wasn't enough for the lawyer. He went back home 3 more times to find the other $21,000 that he lost on a succession of three days of betting. Grand larceny alleged, November 20th, 1912. Gondorf, Bradford, and Krakowski indicted in New York, charges with swindles. Charles Gondorf, known to the police as King of the Wiretappers. I wonder if that comes with an honorarium. Do you get any money for being King of the Wiretappers? So they cover expenses at least? Was doubly indicted. One indictment charging with having obtained $55,000 from Major Gray Pendleton, as we've seen. The other with obtaining $25,000 from the two idiots from North Carolina. Bail was fixed at $25,000 for Gondorf and $15,000 each for the other two confidence men. But bail is just the cost of doing business for these guys, so they post their bail and then they're gone. And until the heat cools off, they go to Canada. Why not? Headline: Wireless wiretapper arrested in Toronto. I would have thought a wiretapper had to have a wire. A wireless wiretapper, that implies either that it's being done over the phone or the radio, or they're somehow not using wires. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me, but everyone's now calling them wireless wiretappers. 2 men are arrested in Toronto recently on a charge of attempting to sell worthless stock. They were identified at police headquarters by their pictures as Charles Gondorf, a wireless wiretapper, now out on $15,000 bail on charges of swindling, and John Fair under indictment for a similar offense. Well, what did these guys do, and what kind of greed and dishonesty was Gondorf trying to take advantage of here? Because as I've said, you can't cheat an honest man. George W. Fairchild bought alleged valuable mining stocks from Giroux. That's the name he went by, so it's Gondorf and Giroux, investing about $30,000 in the deal. Giroux worked the sick engineer gag on Mr. Fairchild. They do it so often it has a name. He played the part of a mining engineer who possessed valuable mining stocks and wanted to sell out for ready money at a low figure because of his failing health. He would accept nothing but ready cash, absolutely refusing a certified check because the purchaser could stop payment. Mr. Fairchild paid over the money, as the story goes, and received the stock certificates, which upon later inspection proved to be worthless. But get a load of this. He's trying to rip off a dying man. He's trying to take advantage of this fellow who doesn't have any more time, giving him a price for his stocks far below what they would have been worth if they were legitimate. But of course, they're not legitimate. But again, what's he going to do? He goes to the police because he's a man of poor character. But in reality, he's the bad guy as far as I can see in all of this. He's the one who his greed exceeds that of Mr. Gondorf's. And they notice an aside that William E. Shinks of Springfield was duped out of $26,000 in the same manner, and also by Giroux. These guys just roll around the country looking for suckers. And it would appear that there are greedy, trusting suckers everywhere. Well, now, this next section here is really like the plot from Midnight Run. New dragnet for wire gang. Nationwide police search for noted band of confidence men. Extending from one end of this country in Canada to the other, an international police dragnet again has been spread for members of the notorious Gondorf band of wiretappers. The search was begun 2 days ago by a policeman detailed by Inspector Furreau in charge of the Detective Bureau after a surety company, that'd be the bondsman, which furnished bail bonds of approximately $100,000 for the men last fall, signaled to District Attorney Whitman its desire to withdraw from the bond. They've posted the money, but they've sniffed something out that these fellows aren't going to show up for their hearings, and if they don't show up, then they're going to be out the money. That is, in fact, the plot from Midnight Run. Apparently, however, the men now being sought obtained information of the surety company's intention to surrender them again to the authorities. See, that's what would happen if the surety company revokes the bond, like wants their money back, then those guys are going to have to either post the bond themselves or return to jail, and they don't want that, so they've all fled. The desire of the surety company to release itself from responsibility for members of the band, it was learned last night, followed receipt by the company's officers of information that some, if not all of the men for whom it furnished bail bonds are likely soon to attempt flight to Europe or perhaps points even further removed from the jurisdiction of the courts of this country and Canada. So they're getting the hell out of there. So nobody trusts anybody and everybody wants their money back, and Gondorf does what only he can do, and he takes off. But they eventually catch him. In 1914, August, Charles Gondorf goes to the Tombs in default of bail. So they revoke their bail. They tracked him down. And Charles Gondorf, who was arrested on Friday night on a charge of swindling Eugene Adams of London out of $4,600 by a fake wiretapping scheme, was committed to the Tombs yesterday by Judge Knott in General Sessions in default of $10,000 bail. Now, this particular scheme is different. It's not his normal wiretap scheme. This is a fun little variation. Gondorf sets up a room. He sets up a room in a pool hall at the back of it where he sets up gambling tables and purports to be running a high-class, high-end gambling den, servicing people such as the Astors and the Vanderbilts. This fellow from London shows up and wants to play, and he says, no, we don't let just anybody into this game. You got to show us that you're good. And so he comes back with $5,000 in English banknotes, and they allow him into the gaming room. But as soon as he's in the gaming room is raided by the police. Of course, they're not real police. These are police wannabes that Gondorf is dressed up in costumes. They come in and arrest everyone in the game, including the Englishman, and they confiscate his $5,000. Unfortunately for Gondorf, at the same time that this is happening, a pair of patrolmen are walking down the street, look into the pool room and see what's going on. They go in and investigate, hear the story from Adams, and arrest everybody there. Adams, as he's being arrested, Gondorf is trying to give Adams his $5,000 back so that he won't press charges, but it doesn't work. Adams, being perhaps the only honest man in New York City, insists on proceeding with charges. Headline, September 19th, 1914, Gondorf falls at last. The case that proved the downfall of Gondorf was not the normal wireless wiretapping variety, although at the outset the victim, Eugene Adams, a London caterer, was taken to a fake pool room where he saw what appeared to be fabulous bets made on horse races. They then are arrested, and then he attempts to return the money. Later, the money was returned by Gondorf to Adams, and he agreed to go away and not appear against Carbonelli and Cohen. Then Gondorf was arrested, and the deal fell through. Gondorf gave his age as 46, said his occupation was a clerk. He lives at number 11 Manhattan Avenue. Now go Google number 11 Manhattan Avenue. It's still there in New York City, and it's actually a beautiful apartment building. Headline, November 27, 1914, King Gondorf's undoing shock to shady sport. Couldn't believe con man who long eluded prison was got. This next scene is like something right out of Guys and Dolls. When Charles Gondorf was brought before Judge Swan in General Sessions, Manhattan, to be sentenced for grand larceny recently, there were two especially interested groups of men who stood among the spectators. One of these groups were men who were smartly dressed, who affected a half air of nonchalance and even smiled and nodded at Gondorf as he was being taken to the bar. These were men of Broadway, in the parlance, sports. Most of these men would face embarrassing situations if it were demanded of them the sources of their income and the financial origin of their finely tailored suits. The other group was hardier, less nattily dressed, some of them with big square-toed shoes, and they watched Gondorf march to the bar with studious eyes. The one side were the gamblers, the one side were his pals, the one side were the con men, the other side was the police department, mostly the detectives that have been chasing Gondorf for 15 years. When the sentence of from 5 to 10 years had been passed upon the man and he was actually led away in handcuffs, the smartly dressed group faced each other with lifted eyebrows and then mournful nods, and then with half-apprehensive glances at the court officers, stole out of the room. The other group turned also to stare at one another and then slowly to smile. Does sound like the conclusion of a Damon Runyon play. Anyways, off he goes to Sing Sing. Now, that's a heck of a name for a prison, but he's off to Sing Sing. But before he gets there, there's a civil action that's lodged by Pendleton. He knows he can't do anything through the criminal courts, but he's heard that Gondorf's wife has been buying property in Atlantic City, and so he launches a civil action against the wife to try to get restitution through the sale of those properties. I don't think it ever came to anything. There's no mention that he ever got satisfaction, and Gondorf ends up in prison. So that's the last you'll ever hear of Gondorf, right? No, because he's Charles Gondorf. Headline of the Indiana Times, May 24th, 1916. Convicts find need of safe. Sing Sing Welfare League locks up its treasure. It's from Ossining, New York. That's why it's Sing Sing. Charles Gondorf, wiretapper and secretary of the Mutual Welfare League of Sing Sing Prison, has installed a big safe in the league quarters to hold the books and treasure safely from the fingers of league members who might forget the honor system and yield to temptation. So he's been elected the secretary of the Mutual Welfare League. He's making the most of his time in Sing Sing. But that's not all that he does. The Bridgeport Times reports on September 12, 1917, that a list given out by Sing Sing prison attendees disclosed that Charles Gondorf, millionaire wiretapper, is the inmate fire marshal. That's kind of interesting. He's a millionaire and he's the fire marshal. My God, he's putting his time in prison to good use and being a wonderful public servant. But there's an election being held. It's Sing Sing prison, and somehow Gondorf's in the middle of it. The headline reads, "Election was crooked. Convicts in Sing Sing prison voted under all their aliases." Why not? Details of the row, which followed the annual election of officers of the Mutual Welfare League on Monday, the arguments at one time growing so heated that it looked as if the police would have to be called to stop it. The Osbornites have announced their intention of filing a protest with Governor Whitman. They allege that they greatly outnumbered the opposition and that they would have been swept into office by big majorities if they had not been locked up in their cells as a result of sharp politics on the part of James Green and Charles Gondorf, whom they described as political bosses. Like they're running Tammany Hall and Sing Sing. By the time they were released, say the Osborne adherents, the election was over and corruption had triumphed. Shameful is the only word that describes the conduct of our opponents, said one of the defeated candidates. In order to win, they were permitted to vote under all their aliases, which accounts for the tremendous majority. One man voted 26 times. The campaign was one of the liveliest ever held in Sing Sing, each side having a powerful array of speakers who organized mass meetings whenever their keepers were not looking. The contest closed Saturday night with what would have corresponded to a whirlwind tour on the outside, some of the orators making as many as 20 speeches from their cells. It looks like they had a lot more fun in prison 120 years ago than we have now. The chief issue of the campaign, what were they fighting about? The chief issue of the campaign was whether beanbags should be retained in the program for the coming field day. The Osbornites favored its retention and the reactionaries opposed it. Both factions agreed on one point, however. They would not stand to have a man formerly employed as a gas meter inspector count the ballots. Well, Gondorf serves his time, having fun the way by those elections. However, on July 9th, 1918, the headline reads, Charles Gondorf to be paroled from Sing Sing next month. Charles Gondorf, who amassed a fortune in the fake wiretapping game, has obtained a Supreme Court decision made public yesterday entitling him to be paroled from Sing Sing next month. Did he get out? Charles Gondorf, who specialized in wiretapping schemes and avoiding conviction for 20 years, was ordered released from Sing Sing prison yesterday by the State Board of Parole. Gondorf, whose real name is McDonald, again another name, and who was known as the king of the wiretappers, served 4 years and 1 month of an indeterminate sentence. He was eligible for parole because of the time allowance for good behavior. I would say it wasn't good behavior, it was great behavior. He spent some of the most productive times. Forget about the Birdman of Alcatraz. I mean, you got the fire marshal of Sing Sing here. Now he's about to get out, and here is published one of the most amazing articles I've ever seen in a newspaper. This article is about a person who's made his living through criminal activities entire life. Have a look at this. Headline, look out, Mr. Gondorf is at large again. No master criminal of the detective novels or the movies ever performed more spectacular exploits than this engaging dress suit swindler of millions who has just walked out of Sing Sing prison. And the article goes on with the most in-depth analysis of his tactics, of his strategies, of his very manner, and how he was able to do what he did. It begins, at your club some evening soon, it's quite possible that you may meet a man of distinguished manner, faultless dress and highly polished speech, who will gracefully manage to turn the conversation to horse racing. Presently he will tell you in whispered confidence that he knows a way to play the races and always be a sure winner. Later on he will suggest, but don't let him get another word out, just call the police, it says. The more plausible the scheme for making money easily, and the more well-bred, prosperous, and trustworthy the man presenting it appears, the more you must beware. That is, unless you have so much money you don't mind throwing a few thousands away. No one can safely consider himself proof against the wiles of a super crook such as Gondorf has been for 20 years. Hundreds of businessmen and professional men of the highest standing have fallen surprisingly easy prey to him, and each time the swindler's trap was sprung, the unfortunate victim lost at least a small fortune. It cost Daniel C. Curry, former comptroller of the city of Winnipeg, $64,000 for allowing the benevolent man of leisure, who he met at French Lick Springs. Go have a look. Have you ever been to the French Lick Resort in southern Indiana outside of Louisville? Go look it up. Google it right now. It's worth it going there just for the golf courses. Whom he met at French Lick Springs to let him in on the ground floor of a scheme to bilk New York pool rooms out of a cool $500,000. Well, it didn't work out. It didn't work out for Mr. Curry, just like it didn't work out for anybody else. $43,000 was the price Arnold Swantine, a well-known Ohio physician, paid for believing what a chance acquaintance on the 20th Century Limited, who displayed letters of introduction from two of Cleveland's leading bankers, had to say about a mythical consumptive engineer in his mind. So he was running the fraudulent engineer scam on him. Orlo, Bannard, and S.J. Nutley of Portland, Oregon, were firmly convinced that a certain distinguished elderly gentleman was the authorized agent of a Spanish convict who needed financial aid to recover $300,000 worth of buried treasure. Before they finished dining with him one night in his luxurious suite at the Waldorf Astoria, they handed him a certified check for $37,000. Needless to say, they never saw their genial host again, and they have only the memory of a delicious dinner to show for their lifetime savings. Like so many other wealthy men, Major Pendleton, our man from the South, spends a great deal of time in New York. He's a very familiar figure in the Fifth Avenue clubs and at the Waldorf Astoria and other fashionable hotels. A university-trained, widely traveled man of the world, Major Pendleton is the last man any ordinary swindler would select as a likely victim. But Gondorf seems to have pegged him as an easy mark, and it goes on to describe how they relieved him of his $55,000. So engaging is Gondorf's personality and so brilliant his powers as a conversationalist on all sorts of topics that the regret of some of his victims over their financial losses is actually tempered by pleasant memories of the hours they passed with him while they were being led towards his trap. That's the key to being a confidence man. The mark has to enjoy his time with you. He must not have any suspicion that anything that's happening here is at all below board. It's shameful the way he swindled me, said a Boston banker who helped swell the confidence man's fortune by nearly $100,000. But I certainly did enjoy knowing him. He gave me some ideas that have been a wonderful help to me in my particular hobby, the collection of old books. Widely read, wide knowledge. You need that sort of thing in running confidence games at this high level, because you've got to be able to interact with your marks at exactly their same level. Gondorf is a man who can rub shoulders with millionaires in fashionable clubs and Fifth Avenue drawing rooms and never excite anything but approving glances. And this is his technique. In sales, it's known as the turnover. In a sales situation, you talk to your client, say you're trying to sell him a stereo or whatever modern thing is, you're selling him a computer. You talk to him about it, you recommend it, you show what the features of it are. He's hesitant about buying it. Your manager comes over, you take a few steps backwards and just walk away while the manager takes over and says the exact same things that you just said. But psychologically, he's an independent human. He's reinforcing in the mind of the purchaser what the previous salesman said, and that turnover is very effective. And that's what Gondorf would do. After picking out the victim and winning his confidence, he likes to eliminate himself and leave to other trusted and carefully trained members of his staff the culmination of the swindle. He's rarely, if ever, there at the end when the trap is set, but he's laid all the groundwork leading up to that. Well, you don't want to meet a man like Gondorf unless you want to be relieved of your life savings. The question at this point, though, is what happened to him once he's released from prison? The literature seems to indicate that he went to Atlantic City, where he ran a saloon and worked as a barkeep. That would keep him busy, in my opinion, for about 20 minutes a day. This is a man who has an amazing skill, and just because you've gotten a little older doesn't mean you're going to stop practicing it. The world's greatest lumberjack is not going to stop chopping down trees just because it's a little more difficult. I would suggest that he continued on under aliases, doing different types of scams. Apparently, the wiretapping scam did, in fact, wear itself out and everyone became aware of it. But there's a million other frauds that can be run out there. It would be madness to think that he didn't participate in that. And you almost hope that he did, because somebody who's this good at doing something like this should be allowed to continue. It's just unfortunate that we don't know the results of any of his 1920, 1930 activities. But that's it. That's Charles Gondorf, the king of the confidence men. When we next come back, we'll have another in-depth analysis of some interesting happenstance from 1925 or before. So from everybody here, this is the 100 Proof Newshound saying goodbye for the 100 Years and More show. Take care.